solve the math problem. So when you evaluate a math problem, you are breaking it down and you are figuring it out, and you are really analyzing all those numbers very carefully and making sure that you solve the problem. All right, so evaluate is a fancy word for that. And speaking of fancy words, we're going to have a lot of vocabulary in math this week, because there's a lot that's going to be going on this week. And Mr. Mullen was kind enough to put some of those vocabulary words on for us on his vocabulary practice for this week. So evaluate is one of your vocabulary words for this week. So when you say evaluate this math question, it is asking you to solve it. It's a nice way of asking you to solve the problem. We're going to have other vocabulary words such as factor, multiple, prime, composite. These are all words that we're going to use today and tomorrow. And then as we go on, at the end of the week, we're going to talk about prime factorization and the distributive property. And we're going to use terms also that are coming up like expressions and equations. So we're going to be getting into some pre-algebra type things as well next week, possibly the week after. But these are all really good vocabulary terms for math that are necessary in order to solve the upcoming problems. So just so you know, some of your vocabulary this week is going to come from math. So everything so related, and I love that we're all teaching together because we can all piggyback on each other and help each other out in those areas. So thank you for helping me out in the vocabulary area for math. All right, this week, today, since it's Monday and some of you are still waking up a little bit, we're going to start off with finding the least common multiples of two numbers. And there are two ways of finding least common multiples, but just since it's Monday and it's time change and we're all adjusting to all of that, I'm just going to cover one of those ways for today. Just one way to find a least common multiple, and we'll get into the second way, which has to do more with prime factorization at the end of the week. But let me flip on over here to my whiteboard, my favorite little whiteboard, least common multiples. Now it's the problem is within itself, and I always like to we always like to abbreviate things. So we're going to have the LCM. Today we're going to talk about the LCM, the least common multiple of two numbers. And the numbers that we're going to use today is only up to the number 12 because you should know your multiples. If I said find the least common multiple, or the LCM, of 2 and 5. I'm going to start off with one of the more basic ones. Least common multiple. First thing you have to do is know your multiples. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to list the multiples of 2, and I'm going to list the multiples of 5. If I asked you just to count by multiples of 2, how would you count? I want to see your lips moving. If you were to get, okay, Alexis is doing it. Yeah, if I said count by multiples of 2, yes, you're exactly right. I see your lips moving and I see your fingers going. 2, 4, 6. And these are the multiples 8, 10, 12. And you could go on and on because you know your multiples. And multiples, of course, means you're multiplying something. You always start with the number that you're given, the number 2, because 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 2, 2 times 3. These are your multiples of 2. You're multiplying all of these numbers. Same way when I said count by multiples of 5. How are you going to start counting by multiples of 5? Start with the actual number itself. Start with 5, 10, 15, 20, and you could go on and on because, again, these are multiples of 5, meaning you're multiplying. 5 times 1, 5 times 2, 5 times 3, and you can continue multiplying these numbers. Now, of course, you say common. So we just did our multiples. We listed multiples. And you say, what do they have in common? Well, if I went, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, You could say, oh, they have 20 in common and they have 10 in common. So they have lots of common multiples, but the question is asking, what is the least, the smallest multiple that they have in common? So the very first number that they both have in common is 10. There's a 10, there's a 10, there's your least common multiple. All right. So that is what today's lesson is all about, just finding the least common multiple. Least common multiple. I'm going to give you a couple of numbers and I'm going to ask you to share with me what the least common multiple is of those two numbers. So today's lesson is going to be a little bit more brief, but we are learning about properties of numbers and how to break numbers down and how to find things that are in common. Let's see, how about the number 5 and the number 8? Least common multiple of 5 and 8. Get your whiteboards out or put them in the chat. Put them on your whiteboard, put them in the chat. Share with me what the least common multiple of 5 and 8 are. And maybe we got to this in 5th grade, maybe depending on what order we learned about these things. Jaslyn, try one more time. Yes, Isabella. Yes, Aaron. Yes, Bryce. Yes, Drake. Allison. Hayden. Yes. Abel. Yes. Eliana. Yes. Angie. Yes. Well, some of you guys are miss multiplying. So if I said multiples of 5, you start off with 5, 10, 15, 20, and you kept going all the way to 45, 30, 35, 40. And you can list these out. Usually you won't have to go more than about 10 multiples, okay, about 10 multiples approximately and usually. So those are your multiples of 5. Multiples of 8, 8, 16, 24, 32, and 40. Hey, 40 jumps out at me because it ends in a 0. And if you know your multiples, there are rules of 5. Anything that ends in a 5 or a 0 is also a multiple of 5. So I found it. 40 is a multiple of 8 and of 5. Okay. All right. Yes, these are multiples. Chloe, I think not quite yet, dear. Let's practice a little bit more. I'm gonna put up here, how about the least common multiple, or LCM, of, how about 4 and 12? Least common multiple of 4 and 12. All right, thank you, Shinashi. Interesting. I was wondering about that. Jacob, no. 3 is not a multiple of 4. You have to have multiples. And this is where some kids have learned that we have greatest common factors, but I'm not asking for factors. I'm asking for multiples. Multiples mean multiply, means you're going to have a bigger number. Okay. Multiples of 4 start with 4, 4, 8, 12. Oh, hang on a second here. Multiples of 12 starts with 12 because 12 times 1 is a multiple of 12. So some of you guys said 24, which is a multiple of each, 12, 16, 20, and 24. They are common multiples, but they're not the least common multiple, the very smallest. Yes, they also have 36 in common. They have lots of multiples that they have in common. But the question is, what is the least common multiple, the smallest common multiple? And that would be 12. The least common multiple is 12 in this case. All right. Yeah, there you go. Okay, let's see if I can give you some more trick questions. How about the least common multiple of 8 and 10? Least common multiple of 8 and 10. Yes, Angie, Abel, Chloe, Jaslyn, Isabella, Hector, Jesse, Durrell, Kaya, You guys all got it correct. And now they're coming in so fast, I can't even read your names anymore. Multiples of 8. 8, 16, 24. This is where you have to know those multiplication problems. 32 and 40. And again, if you know any rules of multiplication, there are lots of rules of multiplication. 10, any multiple of 10 is going to end in a 0. And since I'm going to stop here because 40 automatically ends in a 0. So if I were to count by multiples of 10, 10, 20, 30, 40, 40 is the least common multiple. All right, there were a few people who put 80. 80 they do have in common, but it's not the least common. So again, we want to make sure that you have the smallest common multiple. Multiple they have in common is the smallest. Okay, let's try some more. Just to make sure, we got least common multiple of, let's say 3 and 7. Good, Rosie, Priscilla, Angie, Bryce, Bethany, Jacob, Eliana and Xavier, good job. No, Diego, check again. All right, Ashley, Vicky, yep, everybody else. Okay, there you go. Very good. All these answers. Uh-oh, Allison. So multiples of 3, multiples of 3. If I ask you to count by multiples of 3, 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 4 is 12, 15, 18, 21. And 21 for me is a little bit of a trigger because 7 times 1, 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times 3 is 21. It does work out sometimes that the least common multiple are the two that are multiplied together. However, it's not always the answer, okay? That's why you do have to think about other multiples, or it's even a good idea to write out the other multiples so you can make sure you have the least common multiple. All right, let's some more. Least common multiple of, we're gonna go 2 and 9. Go. Good, Allison, I'm glad, thank you. Yeah, yep, you guys, yeah, some of you guys got it. Oh man, that came in really fast. Yes, absolutely. A multiple of 2, they're all even numbers until, so multiples of 9, the only multiple of 9, 9 times 2 is 18. So that one is the smallest. That one happens to be one of those that you could just multiply them together to get the least common. Let's use one that you got to do some your own thinking here. How about the least common multiple of, let's say 4 and, oh, I think I already did that one. 4 and 20. That was an interesting sound. Rosie, try to check again. All right. There you go. Oh, Michael Kendallin, check again. Darius, check again. Everyone else, so far, so Jacob, check again. Allison, check again. All right, once again, multiples of 4. If I'm listing the multiples of 4, you start with 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. And I'm going to stop there because the very first multiple of 20 is 20. You always have to start with the number itself times 1 to get the multiples correct. So 20 is the least common multiple of those two digits. Let's go on with, ooh, I don't want to go any larger than 12 for the listing part. When we get into bigger numbers, I will go bigger. Let's go with the least common multiple of 6 and 7. No, 6 and 7. Yes, Rosie. Yes. No, Jazzy, try again. I think your multiplication's just off a little bit. Angel, try again. Jesse, try again. Ah, yeah, I used 6 and 7 on purpose. Good. Everyone's, all these answers are coming out. And Aubrey, Raya, Kaya. You got it. All right. Multiples of 6 include 6, 12, 18, 24, and they go on here. Let's see, 30, 36, and 42. Multiples of 7, 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, and 42. All right, so this one happens to be one that you would multiply them together. And I think that's where some of you guys got a little bit off in your multiplication. So knowing your multiplication facts, this is why MobiMax is so important, practicing your multiplication facts. All right, I think we have kind of a handle on today's lesson. I have already assigned the Khan Academy lesson for you. So you are going to do Khan Academy right now. Khan Academy, just a few more practice problems here for you. Khan Academy and then break. So first, Khan Academy, number 1, okay? Then last is break, okay? Break until 9:20. All right, so Khan Academy and then break until 9:20. All right, there you have it. Ready, set, go. The chat is open if you need some help.
We're going to go ahead and get started. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Bragg. Appreciate you as always. Okay, let's go ahead and start. Unless we're going to do some work today. We're going to remember your autobiographical incident essays due tomorrow. So today's lesson is going to relate directly to that. So hopefully, if you have questions about that or you're struggling with the structure or whatever the case may be, today will be the perfect lesson for you, hopefully. Okay, here is your code for today. LFL AVA. So go ahead. I'll give everybody 60 seconds exactly to log in. And then we'll get started. So what I want to do today, while everyone is logging in, what I want to do today is just do a quick review of the elements of an autobiographical incident. So what are the things that we need in an autobiographical incident essay, sort of review that, and then take a closer look at the graphic organizer, the first body paragraph in particular. And then last night, I wrote my draft of the autobiographical incident. And we're going to take a look at that and compare that to the graphic organizer. So it took me about 30 minutes to write, and I immediately wanted to go back and start revising and editing and doing all of that. But I resisted that impulse because I knew, I'm like, well, this is not my best work. It's a 30-minute draft, and it's important for you guys to see that and what an early draft looks like compared to a final draft. So we're going to have that conversation today. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we're going to be talking about autobiographical incident today. So let's review. So there are four main components, four main elements to an autobiographical incident. So we've been talking about four things that you need to shape an autobiographical incident essay. What are they? So whatever you know about an autobiographical incident, whatever those four things are, just type as many of those things that you can remember in the response bar there. And I'll give you about 60 seconds. Okay. So what are the elements of an autobiographical incident? So we've talked about, let's see how you did. So these are the things when we're talking about that type of essay, we're addressing scenes, which is sort of we're talking about the setting there. The key people are the characters, the main events, the beginning, middle, and end are essentially plot. And then of course, the final piece is the life lesson. So through this whole experience, what lesson did we learn? Is it slow and steady wins the race? Is it, whatever other, pride comes before the fall? What's the life lesson that we learned as a result of this particular incident? So that's one. Then, one narrative technique, one narrative device that we've talked about since the beginning of the year has been dialogue. And so can you use dialogue and should you use dialogue in an autobiographical incident? The answer is yes, absolutely. But the dialogue should serve one of two purposes. One is to move the story forward. The other is to reveal character. If it's not doing either or both of those two things, then it really doesn't belong there. So here is my graphic organizer for this particular essay. So a most deadly sponge. So this graphic organizer should look familiar. And this is sort of what I did. You'll see that there's no introductory paragraph. I haven't gotten there yet. We've got the first body paragraph and there's no concluding paragraph. So what we're looking at is right here. So those middle three body paragraphs, I have what happens right before reading class, which is right before I take the lava rock to the face. So what are the events that lead up to that? That's what I'm doing here in this first paragraph. The second paragraph will be about the event itself, so catching the lava rock to the face. And then over here, the third paragraph will be the events right after that. So you can see here, having fun in Spanish class, because right before that, I was in Spanish class, so clowning around in there, go figure. And it was a class of other seventh graders. So it was the 80s, so there were clothes. Middle school is not that bad, especially when I was in a class of other seventh graders. I didn't end up in a trash can. I didn't end up being beat up. There used to be, when you went to middle school back in our day, there were always rumors of all these terrible things that were going to happen to you once you got to campus, and a lot of it was just intended to sort of scare you or whatever the case may be. But it wasn't that bad, and that was a fun class. But then walking from third period to fourth period, that was a little dicey because suddenly I'm in this class with nothing but ninth graders, and it was a little intimidating. So, but these are all the events that appear right before the main event. So you can see here, I didn't go into a lot of detail, but the main thing, the guidepost for me here is right before reading class. So what happens immediately before the event? And this is what's happening now. So let's take a look. So this is, and I completed this graphic organizer before I started writing. And there's a reason for that. This is supposed to guide my entire essay. So I went and I filled out all of the, I didn't go from start to finish, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. So I wanted to do the middle 3 paragraphs first, because that's the beginning, the middle, the end, really. So having fun in Spanish class, so I listed all those things there. Walked into reading class, okay, right there, tossing the fatal throw. Fantasies of popularity gone, girls walking me to the office, blood everywhere. Soft looking things can break your face if you're not careful, okay? Didn't do the concluding paragraph yet because that's sort of part of it. And then I did my introductory paragraph. But I always start with the body paragraphs, because if I can keep those straight, my essay is going to be on track. So it's going to be linear, it's going to make sense, it's going to be organized, and then I can work on the introductory paragraph and then focus on the conclusion. So what is this all about? This is the issue, and this is a key point here. So before I go into the essay and we start looking that over, this is a really key point here. When you are doing an essay like this, I think what throws a lot of people is they're like, oh man, I have to write an essay that's 500 words or 1,000 words or 2,000 words or whatever the case may be. People run into difficulty when they think of it as just 500 words or 1,000 words. That's a lot. So, and it's one essay. So it just becomes this huge, monolithic, unmanageable task. I don't look at essays that way. I look at essays as 5 little stories that make one big story. So what do I mean by that? I look at the introductory paragraph as its own little story. So it has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. And that beginning, middle, and end includes a hook and thesis statement. So in that introductory paragraph, whatever I'm writing about, my reader should know the topic and know exactly what I'm talking about. Then I have the events leading up right before the class. So this paragraph here is essentially its own little story with its own beginning, middle, and end. Same with this paragraph, same with this paragraph, and same with the concluding paragraph. So instead of looking at it as one huge, just monolithic task, I just try to break it down into smaller parts. And it doesn't seem as intimidating or overwhelming when I do that. So that's meant to be a little practical there. So hopefully that helps. So let's go ahead and take a look at the essay here, and then we're going to come back. And what I want to do, so I'm going to read the essay, And then we're going to come back to the graphic organizer, and I want to take a look and see how true I was to the graphic organizer. Because I'm not going to lie, I did the graphic organizer first, but when I started writing, I didn't come back to the graphic organizer. I'm not saying that that's the way to do it. I just wanted to get it done, knowing that I was going to come back and revise. Like I said, I wanted to immediately start revising last night after I finished, but I didn't, because I'm like, okay, I want everyone to see what this work looks like first draft, as opposed to a revised or final draft. So let's take a look. So here is good Lord, my son is hopping around here. Okay, so a most deadly sponge. You'll see this right up here. This is just how an essay should be formatted. So you have your title, you have your name, excuse me, got the Rona, the date, and then your teacher's name. So let's go ahead and take a look at this, and then we'll go back to the graphic organizer to see how it stacks up. So it was 1982. Zombies were everywhere. They shuffled through the hallways of Hook Junior High, eyes vacant, lifeless arms dragging. But these zombies were different. They caught me by surprise. I was just trying to get from my Spanish class. They all danced in unison, and they only danced to Michael Jackson's Thriller. Thriller had taken the world by storm, including my middle school. Little did I know that I would soon be a blood-soaked zombie myself. I had no reason to suspect my day would end badly. Spanish class was great. My instructor, Senor Johnson, that very Latin name, was a good teacher, but that didn't stop me from giving him a difficult time in class. He made class fun. He made these funny gestures for Spanish words. My favorite was divertido. He always stood in the middle of the classroom with a goofy, maniacal grin on his face, waving his hands. I loved this class. It was nothing but seventh graders, my people, my tribe, familiar faces who were accustomed to my wisecracks. But that was third period. Fourth period was an entirely different scene. Okay, so let's. I want to go back. I want to go back to the graphic organizer for just a moment. So here, didn't talk about the girls, the bros, didn't really talk about that, didn't really talk about the clothes, but sort of talking about how, it wasn't that bad. I didn't talk about the trash can or beat downs. So I may go back and add like, especially these bottom three things, I may go back because I wrote those things for a reason. And I think they might give that particular paragraph a little more body, a little more, something a little more interesting. So the clothes, I think that would actually take away from what's going on there. So I'm not going to add too much about that, if anything, but I really want to focus on how safe and warm that particular class was. So, and then that final sentence here, fourth period was an entirely different scene. So again, in this paragraph, I kind of have a hook or a topic sentence. I had no reason to suspect my day would end badly. So that's my beginning. The middle is sort of what was happening in Spanish class. And the end is, now I've got to go to this class that I'm not entirely comfortable with. So moving on to the next paragraph. Back in 1982, middle school was 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. This was back when school still had something called corporal punishment. Corporal punishment was a fancy way of saying that your principal had the right to physically spank you if you got out of hand. In some ways, it was like going to school with adults. Some of the 9th graders looked like men, beards, muscles, sham sleeveless shirts, parachute pants, and the girls looked much different than they did at Village Elementary. For some reason, even though I was a good reader, my counselor put me in a reading class with 9th graders. This was disastrous. I was out of my depth. Middle school was not unlike prison. I spent substantial swaths of time packed into rooms with unwilling people, avoiding eye contact in the hallways, and tried not to get stabbed in the shower after PE. Once the final bell sounded, I ran to my locker, jammed books into my backpack, and then began the 3-mile march home to the Mojave Trailer Park. I usually held my breath from third period to fourth. The buildings were all the same, but as I approached my fourth period reading class, things changed. It was like being teleported to Victor Valley College. Like I said, once I entered a certain territory, I kept my head down and slunk into my desk as much as a 6'2" seventh grader could. But this day was entirely different. Or I'm sorry, but this day was different. Sorry, give me just a second. Okay, sorry, I had to check a fool. All right, so let's go back here. So right here, this was walked into, or actually, no, let's go back here. So really, this particular paragraph, back in '82, this is almost more of an extension of like before the event. So I haven't gotten to class yet. So this is almost like a bonus paragraph. Now, one thing that I will say before I move on is corporal punishment. I'm going to take that out. Is it interesting or funny, or it's okay, man, people used to get spanked in school. Yeah, that may be interesting, but it doesn't really relate to my story. It doesn't have anything to do with it. So I can tell you right now that I'm going to take that out, because it just has nothing to do with where my story is going. So all of this here, like, even though I made it a separate paragraph because I don't want somebody to look at a huge block of text because they're probably not going to want to read it, this is essentially all one big paragraph here. But this day was different. So now I have reached the reading class, or sort of the event itself. So most of the time I walked into a room of sullen-faced ninth graders who clearly had other things on their minds. But today was different. As I approached the room, I could hear laughing, shouting, the sounds of fun, not something you associated with a middle school classroom. I stood in the doorway and froze. It took me a minute to figure out the source of everyone's amusement. Along the back wall of the classroom, 2 boys were tossing an object that looked like a dark gray brain. They threw it between their legs, behind their backs, like Magic Johnson on a fast break. It looked like a sponge. The room was electric with fun. Spirits were high. This was my chance to become the lovable little 7th grader, the class mascot, the cool kid who avoided after-school beatdowns because he was a connected guy. Buzz off, jerk. Don't you know I'm friends with Winfred Richardson and John Spoggy? All of this was too much. I was just one act away from securing my status as the only cool 7th grader in a sea of nerds. Yo, over here, I shouted confidently, clapping my hands. The kid holding the sponge shrugged and with perfect form threw it like a football from across the room. As the sponge sailed in a tight spiral, across the room, I folded my arms behind my back and stuck out my face. Victory was mine. I could feel it. The 9th graders would find my caper so original and hilarious, they would high five, low five, and then hoist me up on their shoulders and carry me to the cafeteria where I would buy cellophane wrapped burritos for everyone. But as the sponge reached my face, all my dreams grew cold while my face grew hot. I felt the cartilage in my nose crack and grind. I realized that the sponge was not a sponge, it was a lava rock. My watering eyes opened, only to see blood pouring from my nose onto my white t-shirt. Several girls shrieked in horror. Oh no! Oh yes, I'm afraid. Two of the cuter girls in the class came to my aid, each grabbing an arm and shuffling me to the office, staying clear of the blood streaming from my nose. While this is something I spent a good deal of time dreaming about this situation in other classes, this is not what I had in mind. Maybe at a dance or a football game at Victor Valley High School, just not with a concussion, broken nose, and blood all over my crispy new white t-shirt. As I celebrated my face rearranging Pyrrhic victory, something occurred to me. Even soft-looking things can break your face if you're not careful, okay? So that is the entire essay. Like I said, it took me about 30 minutes to write and to get done. And so I'm going to go back and definitely change some things because there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but I think the bones are there. The reading class, I think of all the paragraphs, especially after reading it aloud, one thing that I'll recommend, so little sidebar before I get back into this. Reading your own work aloud is the most important thing that you can do when you're writing. So what do I mean by that? Once you have written a draft of any kind, read it out loud. You don't even need to read it to anyone, just you physically saying the words of your essay aloud, you are going to catch mistakes. You're going to catch mistakes, and you are going, when you hear it, you're gonna think to yourself, okay, that didn't quite come off like I wanted it to, or I'm not really saying what I wanted to say. And those are important moments when you are writing, most specifically when you're revising. So the most important thing that you can do, other than have a structure for your essay, is to read your work aloud when you're done. So, and I know year after year, students blow me off on that, but it's the most important thing that you can do. So my personal analysis of this particular essay, it's okay, it's a good start, but I'm not happy with the introductory paragraph. I need to tighten that up a little bit. I think the strongest paragraph is about the incident itself. And then I need to tighten up really the first and the third body paragraphs. And then I'm not really happy with the concluding paragraph either. But one thing I will say is, even though this particular draft has its flaws, it has a structure. So just hearing this, somebody would be like, okay, well, they might have issues with the way certain things are phrased, or, you know, you don't really need that, or I would like to hear a little bit about this. It has a structure. So now when I have to go back and revise, it's not going to be that big of a deal. I'm just going to have to go in and revise at a word and a sentence level. I'm not going to have to just like cut out full paragraphs or, you know, that happens sometimes, but it's mainly going to be revision at the word and the sentence level, and not the overall structure of the piece. So that's basically that. So, okay, I'm going to come back.
Of sixth graders. The story starts out that it revolves around an incident that happens in the cafeteria.
Mr. Mullen, I'm sorry, like your audio is cutting out, so I don't know, could you go back just a little bit? Like the first part of what you were saying got cut off. We couldn't hear you.
Too bad. Can you hear me now?
Yep, definitely.
We're going to hear a story that's similar to what Mr. Hartman wrote about himself. This one is a story that maybe you can identify with. It takes place in a school cafeteria, and there's some misbehavior and there's some consequences. But as the story progresses, you're going to find out that there is some very, very humorous things that take place. We're also going to look at our strategies for vocabulary. Vocabulary is one of the most desperately needed skills that we have we were going through some of John.
Mr. Mullen, I'm sorry, your mic keeps cutting out. Is it like the computer, or do you have like an external mic?
No, it's the school. It's like that all over the place.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I'm sorry. I hate to keep interrupting you, but yeah, it just keeps cutting out for whatever reason.
I do not know what to do if I can't talk. I'll try. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just wondering if the story is available to us to push out.
It is. And they could read it and they could do the assignment. We won't be able to review the strategy or those vocabulary words. Words, I have an assignment.
Yeah.
I feel so bad for you.
I know, yeah, and I was like, like I wonder, like I was hoping it was just me, but I don't think it is.
No, it's been like that all morning.
Okay. What's the name of the book, Mr. Mullen, so we can assign it in? It's in Literacy Footprints. Spring Fever. Okay.
Q lesson 24. 2-4.
Okay.
You. Q 2-4. Did you hear me? I said lesson Q 2-4.
Yeah.
24. Okay. Let's push that out on Literacy Footprints.
Okay.
There's an assignment that goes with it. It's retelling. Gosh, can you hear me?
Now I can, yeah.
Sometimes.
It's been
Nope, it's gone. Can you type it in the chat?
I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay. My class, the Spring Fever, that book is assigned in Literacy Footprints. So you can go ahead and check that out. Okay, Mrs. Digby's class is posted as well. So, and I know Mrs. Bragg. Mrs. Bragg, are you?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I don't know why it takes me a while to find all this. But yes, I'm getting there. All right, I believe, yes, Spring Fever, it is uploaded.
Okay, so they're reading the entire book, Mr. Mullen? Okay, so yes, you're reading the entire book. And something tells me, I haven't looked at it, but I don't think it's terribly long. So yeah, just make sure you read the entire story.
12 pages.
That's it. with lots of big pictures.
Yeah. And some good words that you can't hear me say.
How frustrating. So frustrating.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
I wonder why. Have you updated to Zoom 5.0? I wonder if that has something to do with it.
I can,
Go, Ms. Mullen?
I'll give it a try.
Okay. If it cuts out, I'll go ahead. Mrs. Bragg and I were talking before you got back, but one of us will like pick up the reading for you if we need to. But yeah, go ahead and give it a try, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen as it being shared?
No, not yet.
Well, it says it is here.
Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, there it is.
We're going to read this book called Spring Fever, and this book is about an incident that happens in a cafeteria, and there's repercussions. There are consequences that happen to this particular individual who just happens impulsively to choose to throw something across the room. Kind of like Mr. Hartman's story a little bit, but we're on the other side of this. And this is fictional. This doesn't reflect any teacher you might know, okay? And we're just gonna read it. We're going to look at some words. We're gonna use the strategy of substituting, looking at words that we may not know, and then substituting them. So let's begin. Spring Fever, written by Timothy Tocher and illustrated by Jimmy Holder. I like the illustrations, don't you? It was the first day of spring. The sun was finally shining. The grass was turning green, and I could smell the rich, damp earth on the gentle breeze. At lunchtime, I sat at my usual table in the cafeteria next to my friend Ernie. Our mitts were stacked at the end of the table, and we knew that in 5 short minutes, we'd be outside throwing a ball on the field for the first time this year. Now, let's stop right here. I want you to look at this. At lunchtime, I sat at the usual table in the cafeteria next to my friend Ernie. You can identify with that, can't you? Make a connection. But what about this? Our mitts were stacked at the end of the table, and we knew that in 5 short minutes, we'd be outside throwing a ball on the field for the first time this year. What's he talking about? Our mitts. You have to use the context and read around it to find out what it is. But we're talking about baseball gloves, aren't we? Okay, so what time of year might it be? Well, if you're in other parts of the country where they have winter, this is probably at the end of winter, and spring is just starting. Let's begin again. Hey, Andrew, Ernie said, are you going to learn to throw the ball straight this year? Just hold your mitt in front of your nose, I said. No way I could miss a target that big. I bet you couldn't even hit the garbage barrel, he sneered. He pointed to a garbage barrel less than 20 feet from us. I never could resist the challenge. I crumbled the aluminum foil from my sandwich into a ball. I cocked my arm and I cut loose. The foil ball sailed towards the barrel. I was raising my fist in victory when Harmony, the most well-dressed girl in our school, stepped right in its path. Look out, I yelled. But it was too late. The ball landed in her bowl of tomato soup, splashing that thick red liquid into her frilly white blouse. She let out a shriek that silenced the cafeteria. Mr. Wodehouse ran over to our table. He didn't even have to say anything. I just got up, followed him. The bell rang. The other guys at the table scooped up their mitts and left. Harmony had stopped wailing by now. She was just standing there, staring at the red splatter on her sleeves. Sorry, I muttered. It was an accident. She blinked and looked at me. Now, I want us to do something on page 4. I want you to get your pens and I want you to get your whiteboards. And I want you to find a word that begins with the letter S. And I want you to find the word that you think is the hardest word that starts with an S on this page. The hardest word to maybe describe what it means. One word starts with S on page 4. The hardest word that you think that would be hard for you to describe what it means. Okay? Maybe it's a word that you don't know. It starts with S and you don't know. But what's that word? When you get that word, can you hold it up for me to see? Page 4, only page 4. A word that begins with letter S. Oh, look for your whiteboards now. And I see one. Shriek is a great word. Any other words? Let's see. Sorry. There's a word. Shriek. We agree with that one. Shriek. We agree with that one. Good job. Sigh. Oh, I love that word. Sigh. Sorry. Splatter. Oh, that's a great word. Shriek again. Yeah. Okay, let's take that word shriek, because that's about half of you are picking that word. And so we think of the word shriek. And so let's find that word in here. Here it is. It's on the 3rd line. She let out a shriek that silenced the cafeteria. Now, what I want you to do is we're using that substitution strategy. So I want you to think of a word that would substitute for the word shriek. And I want you to write it on your whiteboard. Another word that would substitute for the word shriek. Go ahead, write it on, hold up your whiteboards. I want to see them. Scream. Absolutely. Scream again. Scream again. See if we have any other ones. Scream. Right. Screamed. Good. Scream. We're all saying the same word, aren't we? Shout. There's a good one. I see that one, Aaron. That's a little bit different. High-pitched scream. You bet, Rosalind. That's exactly what it means. It's a good definition right there. Screech. Okay? Means scream. Good. Let's go to page 5 now. Go ahead and put down your whiteboards. Read along with me. Mr. Wodehouse shook his head and trudged up the stairs to the classroom 25. In the classroom, Mr. Wodehouse slid open the window, let out a long sigh. Well, Andrew, let's hear your version. Ernie was ragging on me about not throwing straight, I said. I was just showing him my technique. I watched your technique from this window, he said. That surprised me. I always thought he spent his free periods brainstorming how to bore us to sleep. In my youth, I was a shortstop. I didn't really want to talk about his childhood, but at least he didn't seem irritated with me anymore. I'm sorry about the soup, I said. You should know never to throw something in a crowded room, he said. He walked back to his desk and plucked up a sheet of paper from a pile. But if you have to, then at least do it properly. Let's go to the next page. He wadded the paper into a ball. The secret is to put some smoke on it. As he released the paper into the air, Mrs. Flack, the principal, strode in through the door. The paper sailed across the room, but before it could land in the wastebasket, it bounced right off Mrs. Flack's nose. Okay, that's chapter 1 of this little story. I want us to go back to page 5 now. On page 5, we're going to do the same thing, and I want you to get out your whiteboards, but I want you to look for the best word that begins with the letter T on page 5. The best word, maybe the hardest word on page 5. The best word or the hardest word on page 5. Go ahead and write it down. I want to see what you think. Trudged. I like it. Trudged again. Technique. Oh man, great word. Tristan. Trudged. Good. Another trudged. Technique. Technique. Another trudged. Technique. Good, man. They're almost exactly split down the middle. Technique and trudged. Well, guess what? We're going to look at both these words, but I'm going to save technique for the end. And so let's look here and remember our strategy. It is to substitute, read around, and then substitute a word that goes in there that might make sense. So, are we ready? Mr. Wodehouse shook his head and trudged up the stairs to class 25. Okay, what's another word for trudged? From the context, we can tell it has to do with something. It seems like it has to do with something like walking, okay? But give me a word that you would substitute for trudged. Need to see your whiteboards. Ran. That would probably work. If you got into a jam, you could use that word. Another word for trudged. Go ahead, write it, put it on your whiteboard, lift it up for me. Tristan, I can't see it. Can you get it a little closer? Walked. Does it say walked? Okay, good. Another one, shook. Ran. Stomped. Slowly walked. Good, that's Hector. Good job, Hector. That's a good one. Slowly walked, right? Okay. Yeah, to trudge is to slowly walk, barely lifting your feet because your feet feel so heavy. So it's like this, Mr. Wodehouse is like, oh, I have to take care of this again, right? Well, let's go back. We're at the point where we're gonna go, I think, to the principal's office. Let's see what happens right here, the principal's office. Being in Mrs. Flack's office was frightening. I could tell Mr. Wodehouse didn't want to be there either. He squirmed so much that the bench we were sitting on felt like it might tip over. When Mrs. Flack walked in, I saw a bright red mark on her nose where the paper had beamed her. Her eyes flashed with anger. Mr. Wodehouse, how do you explain your behavior? She said. A young man is sent to you for throwing objects in school, and you throw one yourself? I was trying to teach Andrew, he said, pointing at me. He has such poor technique that I wanted to show him proper form. Proper form? Mrs. Flack said. You call that proper form? When I played basketball as a girl, we learned to apply a graceful arc to the ball. She scooped up the paper from her desk, crumpled it into a ball, and cocked her wrist. Pay attention, both of you. Mrs. Flack launched the paper towards a planter hanging from the ceiling. The arc was graceful, but the paper sailed way past the planter and into the office across from hers. There was a faint splash followed by some angry mumbled words. Moment later, Dr. Wooster, the superintendent, walked in. He held a mug of coffee in one hand and the end of his necktie in the other. The tie looked expensive, which was a shame since a stream of coffee was running down it. More trouble. This was my first visit to Dr. Wooster's office. His desk was as big as some of our classrooms, but it was bare, completely bare, except for a kicking tee that held a miniature football. Dr. Wooster plopped into his chair, setting his now half-full coffee mug in front of him. He picked up the football. Mrs. Flack, what do you have to say for yourself? He asked, squeezing the football. Mr. Wodehouse had been giving this young man instructions on how to throw properly, and he was doing it all wrong. Mr. Wodehouse's face turned bright red. My throw was perfect until you got in the way. That's enough, said Dr. Wooster. We can all agree that the young man should not have been throwing. Can we all agree that the young man should not have been throwing anything indoors? Mr. Wodehouse and Mrs. Flack nodded their heads. Good, Dr. Wooster said. Now, on page 9, I want you to find for me this time. It's the last time we're going to do it today. But I want you to find a word, the best word, that starts with M. M. And I want you to write it on your whiteboard. The best word that you can find on this page, page 9, that starts with M. Then hold it up for me. Let me see the word you chose. And I'm waiting for your whiteboards. Miniature. I love that word. Miniature. Good job, Miss Hoskins. Miniature, miniature. Mumble. I love that word too, Michael. Mumbled, good. Miniature, miniature. Mum. Miniature. Jaslyn, I think you can find a better word than my, but that starts with M. That's true. Okay, yeah, let's look at the word miniature. Let's look, everybody find the word miniature on this page, okay? I have to look for it because I'm not really sure where it's at. Did we see it? Miniature football. Okay, let's read that sentence. His desk was as big as some of our classrooms, but it was completely bare except for a kicking tee that held a miniature football. But if you were to take another word and put here for miniature, what would it be? Go ahead and write it and hold it up for me. Tiny, Angie, that's right. She even wrote it tiny, that's right. Yeah, tiny, tiny, small, very little, good job. Tiny, small version of, good job, Chloe. Small, right. Baby size, I like it, Kiara. You're right, small, tiny, tiny, tiny. Yeah, we're all getting the right idea. Miniature means to be very, very small or tiny. You're right. So all of those work. Babies, smaller than baby size even, right? So let's go one more time to page number 10. Now that's behind us. Let me show you all the proper way to throw a ball. The trick is to use the right throw for the situation. Sometimes you have to zip the ball on a line, like a baseball, Mr. Wodehouse said. Dr. Wooster glared and went on. Other times you have to lob the ball, like a basketball, Mrs. Flack said. Another glare from Dr. Wooster. To get it in the garbage barrel, you need both the right pace and the right arc. And it just so happens that I specialized in that type of throw in my younger days. Wow, I bet I could still. Dr. Wooster slid back his chair and stood up. We're at the top of page 11. Read along with us. He cocked his arm, faked left, faked right, and then threw the miniature football towards the wastebasket in a distant corner of his office. The toss looked good until the ball struck a hanging light and landed in his coffee mug, spraying both Mrs. Flack and Mr. Wodehouse. That prompted all three of them to start a heated argument about the right way to throw, and I was able to slip out unnoticed. Out in the hallway, I spotted Harmony, now wearing an old Yankees t-shirt. Sorry about your shirt, I stammered. She waved her hand. I hated that shirt. My mother makes me wear it, but those tomato stains will never come out. I owe you one. That's great, I said, feeling relieved. Maybe I can teach you how to make that shot sometimes. Have you ever played darts? And that's the end of the story. I want to do it one more time. I said I was going to stop on page 9, but I want to use a word on page 12, and I want you to look at this word. We'll do it real quick because I'll give you the word this time. I think the best S word we have here is stammered. Instead of saying, what's another word I could put in here for stammered? Just tell me. Write it on your whiteboard one more time real quick. You see, we're using the substitution strategy where you replace one word with another to give it the paragraph meaning so that you may go on and read. Sometimes we substitute wrongly, but most of the time, we're going to come close. So what is the word stammered? If you're going to use it, what word would you use? Let me see it on your whiteboard, and then we'll go to our assignments. Sorry, I stammered, sorry. So I'm sorry about your shirt. Okay, I sorry. That wouldn't make sense, would it? I stuttered, that comes close. I stuttered. Nervously replied, that's good. Embarrassed, I was embarrassed, okay? You're right, you're talking about things that are good, but those embarrassed doesn't quite work in that little place. I like your words, Chloe, because you're talking about how he's feeling, and that's right. But you need to find another word that can go there. Even I said would work, wouldn't it? Because it's a matter of saying it, but he's saying it in a certain way, and Chloe's right. He's saying it because he's embarrassed, and he's saying it because he is nervous. I'm going to stop sharing with you now. And I'm going to pull up, I'm going to tell you what you have for your assignment. I put it in the comments, but it was real brief. But we do have our new slides for vocabulary. Half of those slides come from math. They are math words. They are words we use in academics, in our studies, in our learning. And they're extremely important for you to learn. But some of the words we had are the words we looked at this morning. The word trudged, I believe, is in there. And so you're going to look. Some of those are going to come from literature. Some are going to come from math. And you have 15 of them. We're going to be going over them this week and next week. And at the end of next week, Thursday, you will have a test over these. Okay? You also have an assignment over our story. And the book Spring Fever has been given to you on literacy footprints. I think for all the classes except mine, but mine I will give you permission in just a minute. I will post it I will assign it in literacy footsteps so you can get to it. But you have on our assignment page a document that's been sent to you that you can edit. And on that page, you have a paragraph frame. The paragraph frame is up above, and then down below, you're going to use that paragraph frame in writing a paragraph, a retell. And the retell goes like this. In the beginning, and you finish the sentence. Next sentence. Then, next, after that, and finally. And if you give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences that all begin with those and turn them into a paragraph and tell me what happened in this story, you're going to do 100% on this assignment. Okay? It's not hard. It's not hard. You have the book given to you. You have the vocabulary words given to you. And so at this point, it's time for you to go to those things and get started on them. Okay? So do those right now. Mr. Mullen's class, homeroom, I will give you the Spring Fever book in just a minute. Just let me take care of that, okay? The rest of you, let's get on it. You can also go to your vocabulary words. And that ends our reading lesson for today. I hope you heard at least 10 words I was saying.
No,
but every,
I know.
when you logged back in, you were fine. You were fine.
Oh, good.
Not a single hiccup. So